hear things like that songs like that, I just have so much going on in my head. Don't you? When something like that, when you hear those lyrics, there's just so much comes up for me every time. And I have a lot going on in my head. Do you have a lot going on in your head? I do. I find that in life. Do you ever find that? Ever? You know, as you walk through your world and you're just thinking, but then you're thinking something else, and then you're thinking something else, and then you're wondering what you were thinking. Boy, that was so important. What was it? That's what this kind of song does to me. It kind of like takes me and shakes me up and spits me out and says, now figure it out. And I loved Martin's image of being in a white room in Beijing, just at the beginning of an adult life, wondering what's going to happen. But you know what? Every single one of us are at the beginning of our life wondering what's going to happen. And the problem arises when we actually think we know. I'll let you catch up to that. So if you're sitting here today thinking you know what's going to happen to you, and you know how your life is going to evolve, I would ask you to give it a possible thought that maybe you don't. And maybe God does. And maybe there's something inside all of us that is taking us and directing us on this journey in such a profound way that if we just got out of the way, things may be different. So I want to start with a question, and it's a question that I asked myself, and actually I did, any of you have seen our website and seen my video about me as a child and my career and how I got to where I got to. The first thing I asked myself is, when I was a little boy, what did I want to be? So I want to ask you this morning to ask yourself, when you were a child, what did you want to be? And I would like you to not go to that default answer that you may have, but I would like you to actually see if you can locate the thing you first wanted to be. If you can go back and look at and hear in yourself, what did you first want to be? Was it something that you saw someone else doing? Was it something that you had a reference to, or people were telling you you were good at? What was it? You know, I remember being at career day in high school, and you know, the counselor's job is to say to you, what do you want to be? And I remember looking right into the face of this counselor, and it was a priest, Father McNamara, an Irish priest, and he said, so Jimmy, it was Jimmy then, Jimmy, what do you want to be when you leave here? And I said, a farmer. That was my answer. I wanted to be a farmer. And I really had to go back and look at that. And I thought, you know what, in the video it says, when I was a little boy, I wanted to be a movie star or a priest, because they're very similar. But when I really searched myself and I went back to that first thing, I realized, no, I wanted to be a farmer. I loved farming. Not that I ever farmed, but I loved the idea. Those overalls, those outfits. No, I loved the idea of being a farmer. Because I loved planting, and I grew my mother's garden for her. I mean, I loved that. So I remember a farmer. And I remember what this priest said instantly afterwards. And he said, you won't be able to make a lot of money doing that. Farmer gone. But it kind of was like that. I was like, I actually like money. I'm thinking maybe not farmer. But really, so I want you to think about what authentically came out of you first that perhaps something influenced you to do something else. I want you to really ask yourself, what influenced your wannabes, what you wanted to be in your life? It's not a coincidence for me that 3 out of 5 boys that grew up with my father's house became police officers. I wasn't one of them. But 3 of them became police officers, and the 4th one went into the military. And I went to ballet class. So, and it just occurred to me, I was going to say, and you are so lucky that I wasn't a cop, because my talks would be so different. But Jim Lockhart was a cop, and his talks are great. So there you go. So, it's not a coincidence for my brothers. It's what they saw. It's what they were influenced by. It's what they saw and said, let me try that. None of them are, well, actually, no, still one of them is a cop. The rest of them have moved on to other things. So I want you to really think today as we go through this, because there is an authentic voice inside of you, and I know we use that word a lot, authentic, but there is a thing inside of you that is pressing up against you, and you may even feel the pressure. It is pressing up against you, and it may be that very thing that you first felt that you wanted to be or do or experience or express, that somewhere along the line you might have run away from or found yourself drifting away from. And it may be because the reason you're doing that is because there's so much influence in the world. There's so many other voices and other ideas in the world that can keep us away from something so pure, which is why it's so important for us to get quiet and actually listen. So I want to go to Martin's lyrics. There's nothing very wrong with being dragged along by the rest. And that's kind of what I'm talking about. There's nothing wrong with being dragged along by group consciousness. There's nothing wrong by almost, he uses his words carefully, so dragged kind of infers to me that you're kind of unconsciously being dragged along by the rest. I'll have to keep checking in to make sure I'm getting these the way. Well, these are how I see them. So he can tell you later how he sees them. So, and I'm sure we'll be very much in sync. There's nothing very wrong with being dragged along by the rest. And I love this. He writes, he says, everybody feels lightly blessed when that happens. And I love this concept, lightly blessed. And I thought to myself, is it enough for me to be lightly blessed? Do I really ever want to be lightly anything? I mean, when I was growing up, people used to say that I was light. I knew what they meant. But they did. People would say, you know, you're kind of light. And loafers would come after that somewhere. So I have this thing about light when it is a descriptive. You know, so I love that everybody's lightly blessed. And you know what? If that's how blessed you're ever going to be, then lightly blessed is awesome. But I think there's more than just being lightly blessed. There's nothing very wise with covering my eyes when the sun of truth shows me up. There's nothing very wise with covering my eyes when the sun of truth shows me up. Now here we may depart, because I believe we have been trained to believe that God has the right to show me up. I think we have been trained to believe that we are not as perfect and as awesome as God. And we are. We are not the allness of God, and I understand that when people come back to me with that. But everything I am is God. So wouldn't I want to shine just as bright as God could possibly shine as me? That's the question. But we have been trained, you know. Identities come to us and we think, oh God, not me. You know, every one of us have had something come along in our life and it shows up and we're like, oh my God, could I really do that? Oh no, not me. That's for someone else. And it's funny. We were driving home last night from 24 Hours of Madness, which was just awesome. I so applaud you people last night, those actors and the writers and the directors who just in 24 hours threw together this beautiful expression of fearlessness. And I was really, really happy with my piece. I was really, really happy with the actors in my piece. I was really happy with the direction of my piece. I was really happy with my piece last night. It was what I wanted to say. It was what God wanted to say through me, and it just happened. And on the way home, Nora asked me a question, and I said to her, I said, I thought my piece was awesome. And she said, well, I guess you don't have a problem with ego. Now, I could have reacted negatively. I could have swerved that car over, gotten out of the car and said, get out here. But I didn't. Because I'm a minister. I kept driving. And I just said, sweetie, we really need to talk about ego. We really need to get an understanding that when we are proud of something, when we know we've done a good job, we need to be able to be okay with that. I said, it's really okay to say you're good. She goes, well, but isn't that just showing off? I said, no, showing off would be telling everybody how wonderful I was, and especially showing off because others don't seem to have shined as brightly. And that's what she was saying, and that's what I was saying. And she was saying, well, I understand that, but won't you make people feel bad if you say you liked your piece? What about another piece that maybe didn't go so well? I said, But should that be the reason why I don't like my peace? We had this in-depth discussion. Now, all along during this conversation, Will is just sitting there listening. And after this, I would say, because we parked in front of my house and kept talking, I was like, no one's out of the car until we're done this. Now, Will hasn't said anything, and by the time we're finished, Will says, all I have to say is I was really good. And I said to Nora, I said, that is what I'm talking about. And she just looked at him with eyes that could kill. It was just, but it was a great opportunity because it's exactly what I have here, this whole idea that we're trained to believe that we should always keep ourselves diminished in some respect. And guess what? We shouldn't. Our job is to actually be the light that God is. Last week I talked about this. I am God. It's still an issue. I've still come across that issue all week. People have been talking to me, do you really think that you really are the allness of God? I'm like, I never said I was the allness of God. I'm losing my patience now. I was like, I have never said I am the allness of God. Has anyone ever heard me say I am the allness of God? Good. Okay. Because, I could have lost it for a minute. Who knows? But no, but all of me is God. There's a difference. Thank you. John Livesey is not the allness of God. Most of us think he is, but he's not the allness of God. But is every single particle of John Livesey God? Yes. And if you know that about John Livesey, why can't you know it about yourself? We can and we should. And we must put our face to the world and let them know that we know that. Because if I know that about Doug LeBeau too. I know that about everyone. So that's really what this is about. In his lyrics, he goes on to say that he talks about the shadows. And he talks about shadows being those things that, or no, he doesn't. But for me, the shadows are those things we don't want to look at. Anybody have any things hiding in the shadows, like their personality traits, that perhaps you really don't want anyone to know? And when they show up, you're like, that wasn't me. I didn't say that. I don't know who said that, right? But you know what? We have to be one with that. We have to be okay with that. We have to see that as the allness of God, too. We can't say that is separate because we're in duality. And that's what I talked about last week. And he talks about that's what's tearing us apart. That is what's tearing us apart. What's tearing us apart is that we don't know that we are one. And that means I'm one with all of the shadow work as well. I'm one with everything in the shadows. And in fact, if I start getting more one with what's in the shadows, then the light's going to show up and there will be no more shadows. And if I get any higher, is that hysterical? But think about that. If you get so light and you see everything from that place of light, can there be a shadowed place in your life? No. These people are getting it. No, there cannot be. So, the shadows. We have to be fearless. We have to be willing to be fearless and face what it is we are afraid to face. Is there anything in your life right now that you're afraid to face? The answer is probably yes. But the answer should be no, if you know who you are. There should be nothing that you'd be afraid to face. Plato talked about those slaves in the cave. These slaves that were trapped in a cave. And within the cave, there were these shadows all on the wall that looked like chains. And they believed the shadows were real. And so they felt that they were enslaved by the cave. And they never got out of the cave. And really, they were just shadows. They were completely free, which is the end of his song. They were completely free to just get up and walk right through the shadows. Your life is similar to that. Whatever you think is going on in your life, you can just walk right through them. It's an illusion. It's not the truth. It's just what happens to be going on right now. It's just the reflection of what you've done with your mind thus far, and as soon as you decide to do something else with your mind and walk through it, that disappears. And we go all the way back to Plato to see that someone already knew this years ago. I'm trying to go, how long ago is that? Years ago. So it's time for you and I to get rid of those shadows. We have to get rid of our illusions and start remembering who we are. And that means get rid of past images. You've got to get rid of the past. If any of you are still walking around carrying your past with you, carrying your past mistakes with you, it's time. Today's a great day. Unload them. Be done with them. I don't want to be a cynic or a bore. I don't want to be a critic anymore. When I read those lyrics, I know that there's still tiny little cynic in me at times. Almost none, I will say. And I know that there is a critic inside of me that criticizes. And Sharon Earl and I have talked about this. Because sometimes my teaching style can go a little bit, not abruptly, it's kind of casual. It kind of can suddenly verge on a criticism that doesn't feel healthy. And that is one of my shadows that I'm shining a lot of light on, because I don't want it. I don't need it. And certainly people around me don't need it. Sharon's applauding. Okay. So when I read these lyrics, I don't want to be a cynic or a bore, and I don't want to be a critic anymore. How powerful. Because if I don't want to be a critic, that means I don't want to live in the past. Because if I'm criticizing, I must be living in the past, because I have to be criticizing something that has already happened. And if I were smarter, and I am, and if I were quicker, and I am, and if I were so centered that I knew who I was at all times, and I am, then I never have to go into the critic, because I will be in the present moment, and I'll know the truth about whatever it is I'm about to criticize. I love that idea about, I don't want to be a cynic or a bore, but you know what? A cynic is someone who bores you to tears, isn't it? Because they know how it all works based on the past. That's what a cynic does. A cynic is somebody that absolutely knows exactly how you should be living your life because they've already figured it out based on the past. But you know what? As we started this, and as I started today, there is no past. There's just now. And you can't tell me how I should be doing it because I don't know how I should be doing it, and neither do you. You shouldn't know how you're going to do it. You should just know that there's something in you telling you to do it, and then God shows you how to do it. That's how, and that's how you become the greatest of actor, the greatest of writer, the greatest of director, the greatest of lover, and I mean that, be in the present moment. Don't think you know what you're doing. Just take it and allow God to take you. That's how we get past that lyric, which is just wonderful. I mean, why do actors, how many actors are here? Okay, how many actors, you know this, why do we remember our bad reviews? Don't you? I can quote them for you. I can quote you all of my bad reviews. In fact, I'm going to. No, I'm actually not. But I know them. I really do. They're like, actually, I do have a few I'm going to quote you. You know why we remember our bad reviews? Because we identify with them somehow. We agree with them, even though we curse our heads off. We agree with them. There's some deep fear inside of us that, oh my God, I'm a poser. Oh my God, I'm a poser. And that's what I wrote down here. We have this secret fear that we're going to be found out. When I played Riff on Broadway in West Side Story, I haven't said that a lot lately, just so you know. Okay? Those of you who are here for the first time, I played Riff in West Side Story on Broadway. Okay. So I am, yes, thank you. I used to get much higher. We're way off town. Now it's like, okay, so, when I was on Broadway and West Side Story, did I say that? I was on Broadway and West Side Story. I was just so afraid they were going to find out who I really was. The leader of a gang? I was light. Right? I'm the leader of a gang? Guys! Look who's leading you! This is only the first time in the history of West Side Story where the Sharks win. Oh. So I was really afraid. I was afraid that they would find me out. And then the first review came out in the New York Times, and it said, and I was at the opening night party, and the review came out and it said, tough gang leader James Mellon. I went, oh my God, I pulled it off. Tough gang leader. Okay, and I'm like, and so I forget, Steve Bogarta showed it to me, and he went, look, and I said, oh my God, I don't need to read anything more. Tough gang leader. I'm fine. I'm home. Until I read it the next day, and it said, though gang leader James Mellon. Not tough, though. For a night, I was okay. The next day, and actually went on to say something nice. It said, though gang leader James Mellon did a good job, the Jets still looked like they just stepped out of some, expensive school. So it wasn't such a good review. But I got a good one, so whatever. So, I also remember the review in Singing in the Rain when I played Don Lockwood. Have I told you that? Yeah. And the critics said that I danced as well as Gene Kelly sang. You think you forget these things? And I found myself that night, and by the way, I read it while I was in the checkout counter of a store in Michigan, because there it was, a big picture of me on the cover, and I didn't read reviews at that time. Yeah, right. I told everybody I didn't read them because I didn't want to talk about them. But there was the review, and I'm like, don't read it, James. I know it looks like a good review. Don't read it. You know they'll say something that will piss you off. Don't read it. I read it. Sang dances as well as Gene Kelly sang, and I went home, threw myself into a hot tub, put frozen peas on my knees because they were hurting, called Kevin and cried. I was like, they called me, it's terrible. And then Kevin, since it is his birthday, called me back 5 minutes later. I'm still in the tub, and I pick up the phone, and he has Fred Astaire singing into the phone, "The way you wear your hat." They can't take that away from me. And then he just picked up the phone and he went, "No one can take anything away from you." Okay, moving right along. Enough about him. Back to me. And then I did a show called Boys from Syracuse. This is getting you all back for saying I don't talk about Broadway enough anymore. Today we'll fill it out. Antipholus of Syracuse, right? In the Boys from Syracuse. And here was the headline. Here was in the first paragraph. James Mellon, as the Antipholus of Syracuse, fully commits to an ill-fated concept. Just think about that. I was in a poodle dress. They had permed my hair. I was in this poodle Greek dress, and I was playing a hillbilly, because that was the concept. And I went full throttle in this hillbilly version of Antipholus of Syracuse. It was terrible. But I apparently was fully committed. And then, when I played Jesus, now here's the one that will turn this around for us all. Here's the quote. "One would think that James Mellon feels it's all right to just be himself on stage, and we'll buy him as Jesus." I want you to really think about the implications of that. Somehow, I really did believe that if I just showed up on stage and sang, that would be enough to show that's what Jesus was. I now teach that. And damn that critic. By the way, in that same review, they said that the major star of this production and the person that is just an awesome, we finally discovered this incredible talent was for Mr. Kevin Bailey as Pontius Pilate. Yep. Can you imagine what that dinner was like as we read that review? I'm so happy for you. Yes, okay. So, going on with Martin's song. I don't want to be just another man who only knows what he don't want to be. That's the line that just rips me apart. I don't want to be someone who goes through life knowing what I don't want to be. And here's the problem. We get so focused on the don'ts, don't we? Don't we? We get so focused on the things we don't want. We get so focused on the things that show up that we don't want, so much so that we give it so much energy, that we pay so much attention to it, our life becomes about those things we don't want. And yet that's not really what our life is about. And it's so funny, when you were singing just now, Martin, I was like, my 24 Hours of Madness last night was about a character who sits in a chair, paralyzed, and all she can do is look at the things she doesn't want. So clearly the song had some impact on that. Bonnie Snyder did such a brilliant job being that person. Yes. And then, did anybody who was there last night notice I then turned Kevin into me? Kevin then showed up as this televangelist who's there to sell these glasses called perspectives. That when you put them on, you have a whole new perspective and you understand your God self. So it was really, really fascinating. I don't want to be someone who's going to go through my life So focused on what I don't want to be that I don't hear what I want to be. The title of my talk today is The Wannabe, and I want to read you the definition of a wannabe. A wannabe. A person with an ambition to become someone or something that he or she is not. The term is generally pejorative, with an implication of someone pretending to be that which they are not. I think sometimes we are pretending to be God. We don't fully inhabit the character. We don't get it. That's who we are. We're playing a role. We're trying to act as if. And I know Ernest Holmes talks about the idea that if you can't feel it, start to act as if. And that's fine to a point. But at some point, you have to stop dressing in the role and actually start living the part. So I'm going to ask you today to really think about that question I asked you at the top of this, which is really what do you want to be? What do you really want to be? Because want to be is also a verb, not just a noun. A wannabe is a noun. What you want to be, what you desire to express. That's the verbiage of your life. That's the impact of your life. Ernest Holmes says this, this is a perfect thought, that which is alive, that which is aware, and that which is awake. Alive, aware, and awake. When you are so centered in who you are, when you are so clear on who and what you are alive. It brings you come alive. You are wide awake and you stay completely conscious. A wannabe is someone who doesn't do. A wannabe is someone who just wishes. And Ernest Holmes says self-awareness is not enough. We must do things. A wannabe thinks he knows. A wannabe is someone who thinks he knows or she knows what is out there to be and doesn't really listen to that internal thing inside. And you know what the most deadly thing in the world is? Comparison. How often do you compare yourself to someone else? How often do you compare yourself to someone's experience of life and want that experience? And you really don't, because you don't know what that experience is. All you are seeing is an illusion, just like Plato's shadows. No matter who you look at, no matter what you look at, no matter what you envision someone's life to be, it is not what you are envisioning. The only thing you can ever know is your own life. The only thing you can ever feel is your own desires. The only thing you can ever understand is what happiness means to you. Comparison. I have spent years comparing myself, and so often I came up short when I would compare myself to someone else. So often I came up short, so much so that I was paralyzed, just like the character I wrote about last night. I was paralyzed because I just couldn't comprehend how am I going to get there. And you know what? I never will get there. You will never get there. You will always only be here. The joke is on us, though, because here is where God is. Here is where perfection is. Juana sent me an email that I loved, and I'm going to read. Are you here, Juana? Okay. So she sent me this email, and part of CPR was talking about shift happening, shift happens. And so she wrote this. That's what it's supposed to mean. Shift happens. She says, Juana said, "What happens when the shift hits the fan?" She wrote, "You become the fan, fully awake now." So we are in the middle of a shift, and I don't know how your fan's doing, but I'm sure you've hit it at times. And what Ernest Holmes says to us is that we need to be awake, alive, consciously focused on what we're doing. It's time for us to move away from the wannabes and into the knowing who we are. But the first question really does have to go back to what I asked at the top. When you were a child, what did you want to be? I believe that there is a wannabe, an active ingredient, an active, alive, verbal wannabe inside of you. And it isn't tied to anything out there. There is something in me that is ready to emerge, ready to literally step into that paradigm shift. And it's not compared, it's not like anything else out there. For me to say, it's so easy for me to say, every single person in this room is a one of a kind. And it almost sounds trite. But you know what? It's so true that if we actually stepped back and looked at it and listened to it and paid attention to it, we'd get it. Gloria, you're one of a kind. There's no one else like you. No one else can do what you do. No one else can feel what you feel. No one else can hear what you hear. No one else can know what you know. No one. And even if you look at someone else and want what they have, you can't have it. Because you can only have you. The thing is, we have to get used to being okay and knowing that who I am is okay, is enough, more than enough. So again, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to be when you grow in consciousness so full that you step up to that higher place of understanding, that right where I am, there's nothing I can compare myself to, because there's really just one thing, and that's God. And if that's the truth, and it is, then what Martin's song says really does stand the test of time, from the time he was a teenager till now. That right where I am right now, freedom is here. I can be free. I can be free from all my struggles. I can be free from my past. I can be free from a future that I think I have to live. And freedom really means that right where I am, right where I'm standing in this moment, right where you're sitting in this moment, everything you could possibly ever want is already present. And I'm free from wanting. I don't have to be a wannabe. I just know that there's something in me that wants me to be it. And it's a great game of tag. And right now, tag, you're it. Namaste.